Hello, Windward, and welcome to the Pencils Down podcast. In service of our mission to remediate our students' language-based learning disabilities, we take every instructional moment seriously, and we work to be intentional in everything that we do. This podcast is an opportunity for Jamie Williamson, our head of school, to have an informal series of unscripted conversations with different members of our community about who they are, what they care about, and what the Windward School means to them. And so, we're putting our pencils down, we're closing up our computers, and we're looking forward to sharing with you another conversation today.
Well, first off, Romina, I just want to start by saying I am so excited to spend a little time with you today. This is going into kind of year four for you, right? Yeah. Which is like crazy that we've known each other that long. It's just really been a pleasure to get to know you. As we opened up these episodes for Pencils Down, the format I'm trying to kind of really do is start off with a little bit of gratitude in my sort of sharing of that to you. So you have really, in the last 4 years, I just want to say how much I appreciate everything that you have done to kind of keep your work so student focused. And I also think that you bring such an amount of generosity when it comes to assuming positive intent in others, which I like. It's refreshing to kind of see someone with that kind of perspective in our community who is, who gets to navigate some challenging conversations at times, but always showing up with such a level of kindness and generosity when it comes to the kind of how we assume people show up in that space. So it gives me a lot of pleasure to get a chance to introduce and have a conversation with you today. For those of you who are kind of tuning in, welcome to Pencils Down. We are going through the process of really having some conversation within our community with some folks who are doing incredible work, getting a chance to kind of share their story. And I'm really excited to get a chance to kind of share your story today as well, Romina.
Thank you, Jamie. Thank you for the invitation, and thank you for that introduction.
Oh, yeah.
Had to take a deep breath. You're like, this is not the space to start crying, but I appreciate the words of appreciation.
Yeah. I just think you're doing such great work. There's a few things, as I'm going to kind of continue a little bit of an introduction of you here, because I think there's a few things that I find we have some common ground in, right? One of the connections I've felt with you since I met you is the idea that we both have been a bit of firsts in our families.
That's right.
And so, which I am so grateful for, to be the first in my family to go to college, and you were the first woman in your family to go to college, and even beyond that, to get an advanced degree of in the doctorate sort of range there, right? So you have done so much in your work in that space. I also I've watched you navigate some really delicate conversations, and seeing how you, I think, really show up with such a heart and I think such a passion for watching students grow and develop, but also seeing your passion for the adults in the system as they grow and develop and build their skills and be able to have critical, challenging conversations at times, being open to multiple perspectives. I just think it's really touching to see how you've kind of come in and really done some great work to kind of establish yourself in that way. And another fun fact, I do think that people don't quite know about you as well. From the lanyard, for those of you who may be checking on video, she has a lanyard on that is with some anime characters. Yes. So you are a bit of an anime fan in the process of that, which I'm, it's always fascinating to see what kind of movies and shows and genres that people kind of that kind of stand out for them. But just a big welcome today. Again, like I said, I'm so excited to have the conversation and get a chance to really do a continued job of introducing you to the community and expanding the work that you're going to be doing. So
yeah, of course. Thank you so much. So now you know that you can have conversations with me about race and racism in the United States, or about Demon Slayer.
Yeah.
So.
a nice little range there.
Exactly.
I remember in the process of interviewing you for this work, coming out of some work at kind of consultative level, you've done some work at university level. There's a lot of places you could really spend your time in schools, kind of you're thinking about social justice and equity and helping kids have access to the great things and be able to kind of show up in their full selves, right? To that end, why Windward? What really kind of stood out to you in the process of coming into this community, and why did you want to be here?
Yes, that's a really interesting question, because for me, and I try to make it as concise as I can, because for me, it's before I start talking about why Windward specifically, I think I have to zoom out a little bit more in terms of what brought me to Windward. And I started many years ago as a teacher. I started teaching languages, actually English, as a foreign language. I when I was home in Venezuela. And then later I started teaching, or I taught Spanish as a foreign language in the United States. So kind of like reverse it. And at some point, I'm going to skip through some parts. I transitioned from being in the classroom to, that was the point when I got my master's degree, to working more in higher education and thinking more about administration and supporting students outside the classroom, to going back to the classroom. So I kind of did like that little dance between being in the classroom, out of the classroom, in K-12, higher ed, right? Like many things in between that moment and now. And in that process of my journey as a professional journey as an educator, to be honest, I never considered independent schools as a place where I could do my work, right? And it wasn't anything coming from me that I was against private schools or independent schools, not at all. But you mentioned during the introduction that one of the things about me or us that we have in common is that I'm a first generation. People usually say college student, for me like graduate, right? And to a degree, professional. Once you are a first generation person, you always a first generation person, right? The first one to get, to be an educator, to the first one to, migrate. I was the first one to leave, home. So many things to enter, it's spaces where my family, people like me had never been. So independent schools represented one of those spaces for me when I thought that, not so much that I didn't want to be here, but like, would they want me? Like that was my mentality at the time. Like, would the independent school world accept somebody like me, right? I don't come from an influential family. I'm an immigrant. I have, this accent. I'm Black. I'm like, so many things, right? So I kind of like never even consider it. But one of my great friends and former classmates from grad school was working at an independent school. Actually, I've worked in multiple independent schools, has a very successful career. And she kept inviting me to come to this side. And I resisted it partly because of what I said. I'm like, okay, Marangela, you know me. So of course you think that, you would want me to be, work with you. But with everybody else in those spaces, I'm not so sure. So in some ways it's that imposter syndrome, maybe a little bit of self-sabotage. I don't know, we can psychoanalyze it for a while. But that was my, my first, impression. Fast forward many years later, that same friend who had been trying me to get, to join the independent school world, specifically in the DEIB, was leaving a position at another school, not Windward, where she had created quite a bit of structure and programs. And her literal words were, I want to leave my baby with somebody that I trust. And that person is you. Like, I cannot imagine anybody who I know would continue the legacy and continue the work. So that really moved me, that anybody would say that. So I considered, at the very least, going to an interview. So I had a really good experience. I ended up not, going to that school. But it opened up my imagination. And thankfully, I had a good experience through that process. And at that point, I became more curious. And Windward popped up. Quite literally and metaphorically, right? When you are doing a search. And one thing specifically at Windward, now to your question, and I feel like I couldn't tell this story without sharing that first. It really caught my attention that it's a school for students with disabilities, right? And I thought that was such a, number one, special place, period. The fact that it exists, it's incredible, right? For people who are interested in, social justice education like me. And then the opportunities it felt like it's a place of opportunities when it comes to doing diversity, inclusion, and belonging work. Because my thought was, wow, they already have a framework for working with people who have been historically excluded. Right? People with people with disabilities in general. And in education specifically, people with learning disabilities, and children even more so. So I became just really interested in Windward and thinking about the possibility of working here, and that, fast forward, here I am.
Here we are, 4 years later.
Here we are, 4 years later.
Digging into some big work. And I think about like the progress that we've made on this front over the last 4 years. There's been a lot of good, I think, that's come out in terms of how we're sort of framing the work with our teachers and the work we're doing to get people to understand and how to lean into a real challenging conversation at times, or maybe an uncomfortable conversation. But it has been, I just feel like I've seen so much growth over the time. At Windward, one of our values, and you know this well, and I see this so reflected in you, is growth. When I think about my work and the work that we try to do here every day, and the work that we try to kind of extend to our students by thinking and helping them understand that they have some tremendous strengths. There's some areas they've got to work a little harder in. And we're going to do all this great support, provide some tools, some structure to allow them to grow as human beings, as students. And I do think that we as the adults have to bring that same kind of mentality to the table, right?
I agree.
To show up and honor that there's some things that we do really well. There's some things that I could grow in, and then I have to lean into the work and go through the process of being open in that way. And so when you think about your values as a human being, what are like one or two core values that really drive the work that you get to show up and do every day?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I love that you're asking me this question. I believe in community, but I want to expand that concept a little bit farther, not just obviously community and, just being with people, but I believe in the power of the group. And what I mean by that is people coming together, put their resources together to open possibilities, to resolve problems, to create. There's something very magical, and I like to use that word because I have witnessed it so many times that it's just like magical. And I'll tell you, it's for me in doing what I do, I remind myself of that, and I feel like I take leaps of faith constantly. I'm going to contradict myself a little bit in what I'm about to say. Part of me puts lots of pressure on my individually, feeling like I have to put everything on my back and go and resolve it on my own. So I do have those moments, and I get overwhelmed, and then there are moments when I remember, wait a minute, there is the power of the group. There is the power of people coming together. You've witnessed this before. Bring it back to the group, right? And I'll tell you a quick personal anecdote that part of the big reason why I believe in this, and this is in my personal life. When I was 17, we were 16, I applied to become an exchange student. I'm originally from Venezuela, and there's a exchange student program. I applied. It was a whole year process. I got accepted, and I come from a working class family. And my family didn't have all the resources. They had some resources, but they didn't have all the resources to send me all the way to the United States. I had selected to come to the U.S. This is my first time I came to the U.S. And what really made it happen, besides my parents' support and all of that, was the power of the group coming together. My neighbors, my aunties, classmates, they all pitch in, from like money to like my neighbor saying, oh, I have a suitcase that you can take. I had a neighbor I'm from a tropical country, so I had no winter clothes, and I was going to Maine. So
oh, wow.
I had a German neighbor who was like, here, you can borrow these 2 sweaters. Like literally, that's how I packed, right? So it's that magic. And I go back to that moment when I feel overwhelmed, because I was able to travel all the way to the US when my family didn't have all the resources. When I was 17, I can do fill in the blank, whatever is next to me. So this is why sometimes I bring it to groups, like, what do you all think? How do we do this? And for the most part, it works. So that's a big part of why I hold that value so close to me.
I think it's a wonderful one. And you know, I think sometimes when folks have come through a journey similar to yours, the idea of asking for help and feeling like you need to ask for help can be a really challenge. I won't speak for myself, right? Like learning how to ask for help and access that was one of the biggest skills I've worked to develop. You know, because I always assumed like, well, like they don't want to, like, I don't want to inconvenience. I don't want to put somebody out. I don't want to bother. But, you know, like, and I had someone, because I had a friend of mine who was encouraging me to reach out to somebody about some professional stuff and sort of like some mentorship. And I was like, well, I mean, I don't want to bother them. Right. They were like, have you ever received a call where someone was asking you for help or you were upset about them asking you for help? And I was like, no. And then it was this aha moment of like, why would I assume that somebody doesn't want to help when I come up with the assumption that I'm always going to try to help somebody when I can, right? Maybe there's people in the world who don't. I'm sure they're out there, right? But I think the vast majority of people want to help and want to feel like they're contributing to someone else's success. So. And I think the anchor in community is so important. So thank you so much for sharing that beautiful story. I really, really appreciate it. Because I see that in you in terms of your willingness to kind of have the conversation, try to bring people together, or kind of making sure multiple perspectives show up in a conversation, asking the hard question when we're moving in a direction sometimes of have we considered or have you thought about or what about, what happens when. And so it's meant a lot to see you in that space, really kind of being that champion for our kids, for our families, for our faculty. And staff. So it really means a lot to see you in that space. And I think you live it and breathe it. And I really appreciate that about you.
Thank you.
In the work that you're doing, there's a whole lot of things that are, that are out and about in the world where you're kind of trying to move the needle on our work here, working with teachers, working with parents, working with kids. If you could, for those of you who aren't as sort of aware of what you're doing in this work, like what are like one or two things that you're really driving and working on right now that's really important in your day to day?
Yeah, this is a great question, because one of the things, and this goes back to the value, what part of the power of the group and community is relationships, right? And I cannot emphasize this enough, we cannot do equity work, however we call it, without centering relationships or focusing on our relationships. So that's at the forefront. And we can think about relationship in so many ways, from like having a personal conversation, right? To thinking about what spaces do we create at the school for people to be able to connect, right? Working with the Windward Parent Association in order to create more spaces for parents to come together and connect and build community. Thinking about how do we frame our community meetings with our students. In other schools, they call it assemblies, right? So our group meetings, how do we organize those in a way that are encouraging of relationship building? We're also at a very interesting time, because you mentioned this is my 4th year at Windward, and we have this, what we call the 3-year plan, which is always going to be a 3-year plan. It's like this year, next year, and the following year. And after being at Windward for 3 years, we are really taking a closer look at our 3-year plan and thinking about how do we revamp it, or let's take a look at where we are, where we have been, where we are, and where do we want to be 3-4 years from now. So one of the big focus for me right now, where I'm focusing my energy, is really into looking at that, of like really analyzing and looking into where are we going as a school.
And I love one of the things we started, I think it was right as you're coming in. Time during the post-pandemic has been
it's a little bit mushy.
Blurry. Like this is year 6 for me, and it's sometimes I'm like, what? Is that really right? And I add it up, and there it is. But we created this what we call the dive-in committee.
That's right.
Which was one of the first times I think we had ever, as a school community, brought together teachers from all divisions, staff from other outside of the classroom divisions, parents from all buildings and divisions, and administrators and trustees, and really had a conversation about how do we want to think about this. I think our board chair at the time, when we were moving through this process, Patty Wolf, was talking about, and I love this analogy. So, Windward has a history of being so intentional and so planful, right? So if we're going to go somewhere, we methodically lay all the tracks, we think about our destination, we plan all this work out, and we start the process of moving. So once we start moving, we tend to move pretty quickly, but there's all this like back-end prep work that goes into this, right? I think in some of our equity work, we've approached it with a very different sort of lens of we're going to take this train and we're going to lay track and we're going to look and see where we're at, and we're going to lay a little bit more track and move the train a little bit. So that way we can really adjust and think through the process as we need to, but also engaging voices along the way and bringing people along with us in that journey. Because I think that's what's been, I think, really nice about the process is that we're really thinking through what does our community need, where we are, what data do we have to leverage in this conversation, and how do we think about making sure any child who walks through our door is felt and seen in their truly authentic self and gets to fully participate in our community. Because we know, I think, the psychological side of this work for all of our kids, no matter where they're coming from, is they're starting with this from this space of I historically have not been able to, right? It's this kind of deficit sort of space where they've got to come in here, and I would offer our kids get to be the most courageous human beings on the planet, right?
I agree.
They show up, work on things that are really hard for them every single day. I mean, I just don't know how, what parallels in the adult world, right?
I agree.
Like to show up every single in your day in your boss's office, say, this is so hard for me, but I'm here to try it again, And so I just love that enthusiasm, that energy. I think we have to bring our best to them on that. But creating a space where those kids feel, all of our kids feel some psychological safety, I think is just a really good, important kind of barometer for the baseline of success there. So thank you for the great work that you've been doing on this. And I would imagine, in this work, I will sort of own this as my own issue as well. Like this work is hard, right?
Yes.
All of our work is really hard. Our kids, come to us from such different backgrounds. They come to us from such different experiences. And we have to work really hard to make sure we're doing the absolute best for our kids, because I believe our kids deserve every single bit of that, right? So, but in that, we also have to, pardon the old airlines, but you got to put your own oxygen mask on first, right? So how do you, as a professional, as a mom, as a human being, start to think about self-care a little bit? What do you do to take care of yourself in this work?
I love that you asked that question, because it is one that I struggle with. Today, if I can be very transparent, good Romina style, I was struggling with that question because I'm feeling tired today, especially tired, and I was thinking like, and I can explain why, right? Like, well, I've been doing this. Last week I was also taking care of a sick child, like so many things, right? And I was thinking, okay, something has to change for me to refresh myself, recharge my battery. So it is something that I don't have fully figured out. So I appreciate when people ask me that question, because otherwise I would not even consider it. So it's interesting because it's an advice that I would give. I have so many answers for other people all the time. I support people in taking breaks. And then yet I have a hard time with that. And I think that, not to bring it to the same point, but I think it's also a big part of that, being first generation, working so hard, always trying to open a path that we're not open, well, maybe a little bit open, but not fully for me. And so I gotten used to this pattern, right, of pushing, but there's so much, you can only do that for so long, right? So to your question, I'm not the best, so I'm not here to give advice to anybody in terms of like I'm the voice of reason when it comes to this, but there are some things that I've tried. More recently, exercising helps me.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because I do go to a gym. I love my Zumba classes. I love my yoga classes. I do some strength training. The Stairmaster is my latest challenge. And I hear people talking about like, you know, weight goals or whatever. And I'm not saying that it's a cool feeling to see how your body changes or your strength or whatever it might be. But that's not the reason I go to a gym. And I'm open about it when there are conversations. I overhear people talk initially. I don't participate. But when I do, when I'm invited in, I'm like, I'm coming to a gym for my mental health.
Yeah.
That is the truth.
Yep.
I remember going for my annual checkup, and my doctor, my primary care doctor, expressing concern about me and my mental health. She just saw me that I was very down emotionally that day, and she's like, no, we need to address this. So that was a wake up call for me in that moment, and I said, okay, I have to do something. So I started going to the gym. That was about a year and a half ago, and I could feel the difference. So now I try my best. I actually have not gone in the past couple of weeks, so I think this is why I'm feeling this. But I try my best to go at least 2-3 times a week, at least once a week, and it does make a difference. So things like going to the gym. Try to prioritize my sleep, and I say try because I'm not always successful. But if there are times when I'm like, I'm really tired, but I still have to do ABC. And there are days when I'm like, I think ABC well, maybe I'll do A and B and C. I'm going to have to wait until tomorrow. So I do have those moments when I do say that and make those decisions. So again, not necessarily like the best model here, but I can tell you that I do try because I do know how critical it is.
It's so important, you know, for, like we've had this conversation, but like for me, the bike is the thing that sort of flushes all of the stuff out. Because I mean, it really is, it's a physical sort of piece, but the mental health side of it and then what it gives you access to from a kind of a cortisol flush, from a endorphin release, like all of it is just really, really good. And occasionally I will also sort of pull in some other like projecty things, right? Like some non-school related things that I can do that I can see some kind of growth or progress in, right? So I've done like these big reflection, projects where I'll take a month and I write 30 prompts down, and every day I reflect on the prompt and I will write a little bit and think about it.
I love that.
Right now I'm doing a 2-week, because I play a little guitar and I love to write music. So I'm on this where I'm doing like from last Friday to 2 weeks from that Friday, I've got to write and fully finish a song. Like
original song?
Yeah, totally original.
Oh,
like I'm starting from scratch, and so
that's amazing.
So like it's like those kinds of things that keep me, focusing, but also like in a little bit different way sometimes to give me just a bit of a recharge in that process. And I don't know if you remember from our senior leadership retreat this summer, we talked about self-care a little bit.
Yes, we did.
And we worked on some accountability partners in the process. So I don't know who your accountability partner was, but maybe this will be a really good sort of like reminder to kind of revisit that conversation,
right? I agree.
Because mine was, I want to be very proactive about spending more time on my bike and working to kind of dedicate a little bit of my energy to that. And trying to kind of, because I have to maybe this is the wrong way to phrase this, but I have to steal moments, right? Because I have these days where I go from like 7:30 until like 11:30 at night. And so how do I try to figure out, like, can I steal a little time here, a little time there? And I do with some other things too, but like I love the rowing machine. That's been a good sort of meditative. I like things that involve a repetition of movement, because then I can just forget about the movement and kind of like, pull into this blank space almost. So that allows me to kind of like let go of a lot of stuff and just focus on breathing. That
resonates with me. For sure. And you mentioned something really important. I think it's that part of meditation. I wish I had actually a more regular meditation practice, because the times when I do take the time to meditate, and I have to use the guided meditations. I'm not at the level where I'm able to. I mean, I can do a good breathing exercise on my own.
It's that focus is so hard.
But when I have that voice telling me what to do, I love those. They do make a difference. So that resonated with me when you said like the rowing, because that's where my mind went, to that space of like when you're mindfulness, right?
Yeah.
And meditating, being in the moment.
Yeah.
For sure.
So, which is so hard to do, but so beneficial.
Yeah.
So.
And I don't know if you experienced this, Jamie, but one of the things that, talking about self-care, and I like that you said like you steal moments here and there, right?
Yeah.
Thinking about not feeling guilty.
That's hard.
For taking time to recharge or rest or something.
Yeah.
So,
we have, we're through this path once, and we got to take as much care of ourselves as we possibly can in the process.
Yeah.
So, but it's good to give yourself a little permission from time to time.
So anyway, thank you for that.
If you need permission, I'm happy to help you gain some, and maybe I'll come to you for some permission from time to time.
I'm happy to give it to you anytime.
I just want to say thank you so much for sitting down today and spending some time chatting. I really enjoyed the conversation, as I always do. We joked as we started that sometimes we have to have somebody knock on the door because we'll keep going. So
thank goodness for Angeline for keeping us on track.
So she's so great about it.
Yeah.
But thanks for your time today. I really appreciate it. And thanks for everything you've done for our community.
Thank you for the invitation.
And also thanks for folks for tuning in. So really appreciate everybody being here today. And have a great afternoon. Thanks.
Thank you.